So, good morning, good morning. It's Elizabeth Eleanor, and it's the season of the wise, which, to tell you the truth, guys, I actually put together because I wanted to interview Nicole. So, so the season of the wise is a four-part series that I'm doing with women over June. And basically, is going to be about really connecting with women that have made some sort of massive shift in their life and come out the other side with a whole heap of wisdom, transform their lives and impacting others while they're going through that process. So I want to introduce you to the beautiful Nicole Cherie Hesse, who is my business mentor and an amazing, amazing woman that I just think is a genius. So, welcome, Nicole.
It's so great to be here and so great to hear your voice. I'm glad that you put this together so that we can hang out. Thank you.
Well, you've got such a big journey, like even before you put the book together. There's so much going on in your life, and I've watched you, I've been inspired by you, and to be able to share this with my community is such an honor. And here we are with this beautiful book that has been a huge journey for you. And what a title. A Shadow Called Sunshine. Like as soon as I heard the title, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing. So, first of all, before we start, can you just tell my audience, this is Awakening Magical Women, a little bit about yourself, like who you are, how you were inspired to write the book, but also what you're doing right now as well.
Uh, for all of the magic people in the room, I will definitely relate with that. So we will be all in the magic kind of energy of this. I mean, first and foremost, like I am a unicorn trapped in a human's body. Let's start there, right? I feel this thing dying all around me all day long, right? I can feel the frequency of mortality. It's killing me. But I've always kind of felt like just out of place. I felt like I just didn't really belong in this timeline or in this world. Like, I mean, I just felt so isolated in everything that I was doing and everything that I was. Like, I just watched other people and I was like, God, I'm just not like these creatures. Right? Like I do not relate. And so I had a lot of like isolation. Yeah, right. I know you get it. In my younger years, and I really struggled with that. It was just this feeling of being alone, and the depression that came from that, the anxiety that came from that, the feeling of just wanting it to be over. I just didn't want to be here anymore. And so, I'm a survivor of two suicide attempts because I failed at that as well. I had a lot of failure in the first, half of my life. Like I was just making mistake after mistake. I was, very much involved in drugs and alcohol and choosing bad dudes and self-sabotage patterns that, really very much got me close to nearly killing myself and also choosing a domestic violence relationship that nearly killed me. I was found myself in a hotel room in Bangkok. Guys, don't go to Bangkok with people who are abusing you. It's just not a good move, not a good look. And he had taken my passport and my phone, and of course, we had gotten into a heap of trouble as we normally did, and drinking and drugs and all the things. And there was a moment with his hands around my throat and me bleeding out of the back of my head with broken ribs and a broken nose, where, I thought I was never going to see my kids again because I had made this stupid decision. And, it's so crazy looking back now because I was so cavalier with a life that I hold so dear now. And like I love everything about my life. I love my kids. They're rowdy in the next room. My house is like a halfway house for teenagers. It's like 10 teenage kids over there like eating all my snacks right now. I love getting to be a mom, and and as somebody that really suffered with postpartum depression. And that was, my first suicide attempt was, I just felt like I couldn't be there for my child. I felt like I was the worst mother in the world and I didn't deserve to live. And I thought she was going to be better off without me. I thought both my children would just be better off, not having me as their mother. And, when I look back at how little I cared for myself and how little, um, life mattered and how I almost threw it all away. And I missed that by just like one tiny shred, that mistake of not quite being able to finish killing myself. Like, I am so grateful for that mistake because that failure gave me a new life and a new sense of purpose. And I stopped choosing abusive dudes. I put the booze down. It's been almost 7 years now. And, I went on to attract the love of my life. I have a beautiful husband and an incredible relationship. And Elizabeth and I talk about this pretty frequently because she has an incredible relationship too. And so we get to rub it in everyone else's faces just a little bit. Daniel's special. He's a good one. The joke is that we magically made him out of clay, right? He's like, I don't even remember life before you got here. And I'm like, that's right. I just created him, right? He's the perfect fit for me. He's the exact man that I always hoped of and dreamed of and looked for in all of the wrong places. I am the mother that I always wanted to be. And of course, I started a seven-figure business. I got fired from both of my bartender jobs in the same month. And then I went to Bali, had this really incredible experience of releasing my worthlessness into the sea. And when I came home, everything in my life changed. It was like this rapid shifting of the timelines and like almost like I was like dropped into some other life. And I just brought it to life in a completely different frequency and chose a different thought pattern, a different feeling pattern, and initiated and created this business that grew to $1 million in its first year, and it's now 5 years old, and $5 million later, $5,000, 5,000 clients later. Like, I mean, it's insane to imagine what has been accomplished in the last 5 years. And now I have this book coming to fruition that took 5 years. So for all of our numerology buffs in the room, let's eat our heart out, right? With all of our 555s, right? It's there. But we are very much in the season of the 5-5 portal right now and activating into that frequency. And this has just been a journey of fruition and becoming the next version of myself. And through the book, we're going to explore some narratives around the suicide, surrounding all the domestic violence pieces. It is a fictional story, but many of the scenes are not. Many of the scenes are things that actually happened in my life, and we're telling those stories through the lens of fiction. So it's a little bit more palatable, I think, for the consumer base. And it's also something that in the fiction portion of this, I got to write it a little bit more soulfully, I think. And paint this kind of beautiful picture as we are moving through three different characters, through three different timelines, through a soul life journey that really challenges the systemic cause of violence and abuse in the first place, which of course is worthlessness. So it's a very challenging read. Um, but it was even more challenging to write it and live the years that led up to being able to write it, right? So it is the shortcut to the life lessons of learning how to value your life, to value yourself, and to make decisions that reflect that value.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing, that I'd love to explore is, you know, our whole journey is about vibration, right? And about living the magic. And there's as you talk about that dark side of the staircase, like there's our spiritual journey is not all rainbows and unicorns. It's got all of this darkness that you arrive in, like, and you're like, what the fuck? How did I get here? You know, what drove me to here, and these thought patterns and all of those things, like for women that have had that journey, and are going through the process, haven't come out the other side. Were you thinking about that when you were writing the book, or like tell me a little bit about your process of writing the book?
I think what's interesting looking back with hindsight, right, is that when I started writing the book, it was before I started the business. And so I knew nothing of the women that I would help. I knew nothing of Wonder World and the person that I would become. I had, of the modalities, I had developed like the basic frameworks of the 7-layer transformation, which is my proprietary mindset tool. But I didn't have a name. It was just a process that I did for myself, right? It wasn't a marketing tool, right? Like I knew nothing about creating any of this stuff. And so, as I wrote the first 30,000 words of this on my phone on a plane,
Yeah,
Um,
wow. Like
I know.
that's a feat in itself, isn't it? Like I heard you say that and I'm like, what the
Yeah, just my thumbs, right? But as I wrote those first 30,000 words and I started to see these characters come to life, I didn't know that it mattered. I wasn't writing a book. I was just writing, right? As you do. And then my husband, who was soon to become my fiance on that trip, right? He proposed a couple days later after I started writing this. But he asked me if he could read it. And, like that's like a little bit like somebody asking to read your journal. And you're kind of
Mm,
like, I don't know if you can read it. Like, I don't know, can you? And so I was pretty resistant, but something in me let him. And I don't think that the book would exist if I wouldn't have made that decision. Because when he read those 30,000 words, which actually ended up being like a middle section of the book, it's not the beginning of the book. When he read those 30,000 words, I saw this big, giant man with these big, strong hands start to get a little bit red, in the eye because there were allergies on the plane. Right? Um, and he promptly handed my phone back to me and was like, I can't read the rest of this. Right.
yeah,
Um,
wow. Yeah.
and so I knew that it was powerful in that moment. And I was like, oh, maybe this is a story that is actually going to help other people. But I didn't have any idea about what that could look like or what that would be. But I did continue to write because it was helping me. It was helping me to externalize a lot of the feelings that I was having inside that I couldn't assign to my identity. I needed to give them to other characters in the book to be able to really explore, I mean, kind of the fucked up decisions that I made and the choices that I made. I needed to be able to unravel that a little bit, and that really helped me. And even breathing life into the character that is becomes the abuser in this story gave me a perspective around him. It kind of forced me to explore him as a three-dimensional character and like, what was the origin of this and what was the outcome of this. And so it almost gave my story a beginning and an end when I was stuck in the middle in that dark side of the staircase. It gave me two light sides of the staircase on the other sides, and that gave me the perspective that it's not just the dark side and the light side, right? It's like literally like at a spiral ascending, like a unicorn horn, right? Get ascending like this. And so you go into the light and then back into the dark again and then back into the light. But the only way to get to the next level of light is to go through the next level of darkness. And that to me, I mean, I think is one of the most important lessons that I needed to know to become the person who could create the business. And so the book kind of planted that seed inside of me to help other people this way and gave me that drive and that ambition. But, the book really came first. And like I built this seven-figure business so that what? So that my book could have a platform to stand on because now I have made millions of dollars, but also I have an incredibly large audience full of really incredible people like you that have other audiences. And so we can leverage and create this impact. If I would have just sat down and wrote the book and finished the book and published the book, who would I have been releasing it to? You know?
Mm, mm.
And so the order of operations, really matters in that. And that's a big part of like the magic of this story is the way that it like unwound in a strategic order that I mean, I definitely know that my higher self was orchestrating because my current self back then did not, I mean, completely lacked the vision and the strategic development to create something that ornate, that was so pivotal.
There's just so much in it, you know. I want to jump into so that what a little bit later, because I had when I heard you with this movement, I'm like, oh man, she's a fucking genius, right? I don't know if anyone else has picked it up, but anyway, I'll bring that up in a minute. But like from what I am aware of with you, like you've based the characters on people in your life and yourself, and tell me a little bit more about that because I know you've had some hindsight in what what you needed to do and what you did do. I was like, oh shit, how is that feeling for you, as you've written this book and these characters, um, knowing how closely related they are, right?
I mean, it's requiring a lot of trust of my future self, right? Of my higher self. Like I'm like leaning, I am trusting because I'm looking at her and I'm like, are you sure that we should have done this? Like, was this a good decision? Because, I didn't change, like I didn't really change anything. Like I didn't change very much, right? And so like anybody looking in who knows my life story at all or knows the life story of, this man is going to see those characters reflected, I mean, very accurately in a lot of ways. And I did take some smushing, right, of different personas. It's not like directly, this person. It's two people kind of smushed together kind of energy for the relationship that I was in. Um, but I mean, I didn't really change the names. I'd use their middle names, which I don't think that was smart. So I'm kind of working through that a little bit. As the printer has my book and it's being run on the press right now and it's too late, I can't do anything. But it's a thing of a little bit of fear. And also, it's seeking the significance and it's trying to find the clarity of that. I mean, as I woke up today, the day that my book went live and the first copies sold this morning, I mean, it's a weird feeling, right? It's a little bit like a wedding, like you've been working up to this your whole life or something, right? So it's like a lot of like that anticlimactic feeling, like nothing happened. You're like, it's just a Tuesday. And so there's a little bit of that going on. It's a little bit challenging in there, but it's also knowing that very soon, I mean, these books have to be shipped, right? But like very soon people will read this. And what's kind of scary about that is that my existing audience, the people that, I've been serving for the last 5 years, very much know me. They don't know who I used to be. They don't know the
Mm,
past version of me. They don't know the darkness that I carry because the echo of the darkness that you guys see now is very much a neutralized version of that, right? It's a very clean and clear version of this where I've neutralized this feeling. Like I'm now relaying the transformational energy. I'm telling it to you with hindsight. I'm not showing you the darkness when it really existed. But a good chunk of this book was written while I was still her. I was still the version of me who was in self-sabotage. I was still the version of me who was choosing less than fucking admirable qualities for this book. And like, I left that shit in there. And it was really hard not to edit it out. It was really hard to not go back into the beginning of the book and smooth out all the rough edges. I really wanted to do that. Like the
mm.
perfectionism in me was like, I want to go in and suck all the fucking big scary parts of this out of here. But I didn't. I left it and like going through the editing process was really tough for that, to leave it alone. But I did leave that past version of myself to tell you the story. It transforms throughout that, and you'll feel the transmutation into who I am now, and you can feel that energy shift. But I left those characters, I left a lot of the women in that state of who I used to be. I didn't bring them up to who I am now. And so it's a little bit scary in vulnerability wise for you guys to see that. Strangers on the internet, not so much of a problem. I don't really care. But like I'm a little bit apprehensive for my clients who know and love me now to see who I used to be. I'm always kind of grateful for the fact that we didn't really have video content back then. Right? Like video was just barely becoming a thing when I was doing terrible shit. So like I'm always pretty grateful that there's not a bunch of videos running around on the internet of bartender Nicole doing bartender things because I have no idea what you guys would think of her. So there's a vulnerability in that.
Yeah, true. And yet all the way through that I've been with you, you've never, you've been completely transparent. You've shared that you've had that dark side and all of those things, right? So,
Yeah, but I think
um,
hearing about it from my
it's a
side of the
different story.
staircase is a little different than you actually hearing my mouth for who I used to be and seeing that look in my eye. It was a very different look in my eye back then.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. And so, you know, to like, what about your children? Like, I'm assuming you've had to have a conversation with the kids about all of this as well, right? Like, this
Yeah,
is a big thing. I mean, it's a different thing to moving in and building an empire and seven figures, and like, this is a very different thing.
it is a very different thing, and I don't know how that's gonna go. Like I don't know what that looks like. I mean, it's like one of those things where you're like, okay, well, it's safe for like people in my world to know this book, but like, what if? Like, what if this thing blows up? What if this becomes this big thing. I mean, who knows what will happen? I mean, it's all down to how the readers perceive it and like what the market says about it, because apparently your book is not what you say it is what the readers say it is, right?
Yeah.
So, waiting in that kind of judgment frequency. I mean, my daughter is 15, my son is 20, and so Nathan and I have had pretty extensive conversations about this because a big centralized theme in this book is about his father, right? And so we've had a lot of conversations around what that's going to look like. There's sections in the book that are dedicated to my children, and the epilogue is, centralized around an actual moment that I had with my son when he was 3, after his father died. His father died of a heroin overdose, and I was having to explain this to a 3-year-old when I was 23 years old, which is very challenging to do. And so sitting there with him that day, like I sat down on the floor and I looked at him and I said, listen, said, your dad, he died and he's not coming back. And he said to me, so, well, what happened to him? And I said, honest and age appropriate, right? I said, he put poison in his body and it killed him. And so he died and he's not coming back and you won't see him anymore. And I started crying, like as you do.
Yeah.
The tears come strolling down my eyes. And his little fat, chubby baby hand, right? Like he puts it on my cheek like this and he says, Mama, don't cry. You're still here and I'm still here. And it
Oh,
was just this moment that like hung in my heart for the rest of my life. I will tear up for that moment. I've told this story so many times and I cry every time,
every
right?
time.
I
Yeah.
can't even stop it. But that epilogue is part of, the novel, and like that realization that like we can live our lives in sorrow, we can live our lives on the dark side of the staircase, that is our choice, but we're still here, right? Either way, so we might as well choose to become the people who step into the sunshine. We might as well choose to actually live our lives not in the space of lament for those who have gone before us, and like out of the mouth of babes, right? They
Yeah,
tell it like
yeah,
it is because they're
absolutely.
so much closer to source. And so Nathan, is part of the epilogue and part of that space, and like the moments inside of the book where there is a baby, there's an infant in there, and like the moments in that are very much about my relationship with Nathan and how I felt about him, and and also reflected out through my daughter Penny, and like how I felt in postpartum depression, of just the emptiness, the hollowness of not being there, not being here, like not being tethered and connected to this world, was a very painful place for me to be. And it was so alone in those moments. And so that's echoed through one of the themes that we talk about inside of the book. I mean, it's a little esoteric and it's not so direct of like postpartum depression, right? And you'll explore that construct in the novel. But I actually chose to put Penny on the cover. And that was scary. That was a decision where I was like, should I do this? Like, I mean, do I do this? And like, I asked her permission. It was like she's, old enough to consent and all of those things. And so I said, listen, I have this idea and I would like you to be on the face of the cover. And like, is this something that you would be okay with? And she got to choose the picture and choose what she wanted to, how she wanted to be portrayed. And then I sent the artwork over to her. I did all the artwork myself, like, because I paint and draw and do all the things. And so I did all the digital art myself, which was a risk in itself. It was a whole other can of worms in that decision. But I did decide to put her on the cover. And I don't know how that's going to go. I don't know how that's going
Mm.
to be perceived. I don't know. I've been watching terrible videos on TikTok because it's a little bit like you can't help yourself but watch the train wreck about people ripping cover art to shreds. So I'm a little nervous, of what the public perception is going to be, is like, am I a bad mom for putting my 15-year-old daughter on a book that's about suicide and domestic violence?
Mm.
You know, what's the
It,
public
there's
perception?
well, there's just so many layers, right? There's so many layers. It's I'm assuming it's, well, of course, it's a healing journey in itself, just writing the process, like all of the layers of bringing this out, publishing it. I know myself, I was in domestic violence with my the father of my kids, in not in the same way at all, but definitely both, he was an alcoholic and we were both on drugs and all of those things. And it was because of my kids that I'm here. Like you become a mum and you go, oh shit, like I've got to change, like there's someone relying on me. So um all of those pieces, they become part of who you are. And so it makes sense that, they would be part of the book as well. And um, that's beautiful that, your daughter is in that connection with you because, like this is part of her journey too, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what kind of impact it will have on them. I mean, at this point, like, obviously she's of the age, they're in high school. And so, like, this is something where she has access to TikTok. The kids can listen to the podcast episodes. And some of her friends are more interested in the things than others, right? I mean, some of them ask me a lot of questions about business and money and all of that, right? Like, that's definitely there. But as as they found out about the podcast, some of the kids started listening to that. And then as they find out, as the book comes out, I mean, that could potentially be something too, where kids are reading this, and I just don't know how that's going to go. I don't know what that's going to look like. And so there's a little bit of that fear of the unknown of, what could potentially arise for her, through that process. And I think for Nathan too, what could come up for them within that, within the release of the book. It's part of them as well. So it's a
Mm,
little challenging.
yeah. And so what like just the name of the book, A Shadow Called Sunshine, like it's such an, paradox and such a beautiful paradox. Like what inspired you? Where did that come from?
Well, actually, Daniel helped me name the book, which Daniel is the namer of things. Daniel helped
I
me to
know,
name the program too.
yeah.
And it's funny because we have this running joke. Okay, my husband loves to fish. He's one of those guys, right? And so like every time he pulls a fish out of the water, I always ask him, I'm like, what's its name? Right? And I make him name the fish before he like catch and releases it, and I tell him I was like, the fish don't want to be caught, but they do want to be caught by you because they want a name. You have to give the fish a name. That's his burden in life is to name the
Name
thing.
things.
So he helped me to name it. I had just finished it. He took me on a beautiful writer's retreat up to Lake Tahoe. And it was pretty grueling to finish, right? Like as it is. And we were out to dinner that night celebrating the fact that it was finally over, which of course it wasn't because then I had to start all the editing and publishing. It's not even close to over. But I thought it was over at that time because I didn't know any better. So we went to dinner to celebrate, and he was like, "What are you gonna call it? Like, what are you gonna name this book?" And like we were sitting there kind of flushing and having this kind of like brainstorming session. And we ended up talking about a streetcar named Desire, right? And so you can feel the framework in that, right? A streetcar named Desire, a shadow called Sunshine. Like the framework is the same of this. But Elizabeth, I know you'll get a good kick out of this, is that the character inside of a streetcar named Desire, her name is Eunice.
Oh,
And
no
so
way.
I know. You cannot make that shit up, right? Okay. So in a streetcar
You
named
got to
Desire,
tell the
there's
audience.
I will the domestic violence undertones inside of Streetcar Named Desire was like a lot of like really exploring this back in the day when it wasn't really okay to talk about this stuff, right? Like where it was very much behind closed doors, and then this narrative came out within this story of really kind of showing it. And that was very, interrupting the cultural zeitgeist. And so this book is disruptive in the same kind of way because instead of just vilifying abuse, we're taking this into the radical responsibility side of things of seeing that, we choose abusive relationships and like that we can make different choices in this. And we're challenging just vilifying the bad guy in the situation because the truth of the matter is nobody gets punched in the face in the first date. You saw the red flags and you chose to do this. And many of us, most people, in domestic violence situations, this is not their one and only. Most of them choose it again,
Mm,
right? If it's with a different partner, they still choose it again, right? And so it's a very challenging, disruptive kind of nature as the same as a streetcar named Desire was. But Eunice is the name of the like mascot of my entire unicorn business because it's Eunice the unicorn. And so when I was reading like, the cliff notes of a streetcar desire named Desire, and I was like, oh my God, this character is literally named Eunice. So I was like, this is a sign, right? And so I had to, kind of pull it in from that energy and you take those gifts that your higher self drops in for you. But also it's the narrative of looking at it from the perspective that, a shadow called sunshine, like this man was everything I thought I wanted in my life. He was the light of my life. He was my sunshine. I literally revolved my entire life around him to try and be what he wanted me to be. But the entire time that I thought he was the sun, he wasn't. He was the shadow. He was the shadow side of the staircase, and I didn't know that. I thought I was in the sun. And so that devious mentality and his ability to twist and manipulate through those processes and my willingness to be manipulated is really represented through that energy of the deception of the shadow pretending to be the sun.
And that's the thing, isn't it? You know, when you're in it, it's your whole world, right? And
It's
you,
my whole world.
yeah, and and everyone on the outside often can see it, right? Or
Yes.
or the parts, right? Because they don't see the whole, but they can see the parts. And
They're not blinded by that light,
no,
because that light is not for them. It's a
yeah,
color of light that only you can see. I mean, that's one of the very interesting skill sets of narcissism is being able to reflect back what other people truly desire. And
mm,
that is, another thing of like, a streetcar named Desire, right? Is like pulling in that energy is like he was everything I wanted, or so I thought. He pretended to be everything that I wanted. I fell in love with the shadow that he created. I fell in love with what he wanted me to see. And no matter what anybody told me, it just didn't hold a candle to the way that I felt in those moments, receiving exactly what the fuck I wanted in the exact language pattern,
way,
in the exact color, taste, smell. Like he was everything that I wanted because he was pretending to be everything that I wanted. He was everything that any girl that he targeted wanted because he knew how to ascertain what we wanted and then sell it.
mm,
You gotta tell people what they want,
yeah, yeah,
but the
yeah.
ethical thing to do is to deliver what they need, but he didn't do that part. He was just really good at sales.
And so many women are in like narcissistic relationships, it took it took three for me
Third time's
to
the charm.
yeah, like, and it's like, how did, especially the last one, I was already had my shit together. I knew what I was doing, like I was a healer. I knew about vibration and had done all this work on myself. And when I met this guy and I work it out, like, what the fuck? I've done it again. Like, how did this happen? And I stayed and I stayed and I stayed. Personally, I stayed because I knew that I'd created it again, but I was like, fucked if I'm going to let this happen again. I've got to work out why I've created it this time.
I stayed because I didn't want to be wrong.
Yeah, right. Well, there's that as well, right?
That ego, right? It'll
You
get
know,
you every time.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a crazy journey, right? And a crazy ride because somehow you're feeding off it as well, right?
Yeah.
Or you are. And so, you know, that's where I love to shift into because when I heard you talking about the movement, so that what, I was just like, fuck, she is such a genius, right? And like I haven't heard anyone else talk about it, but um you know, there's that movement, Me Too, right? So the Me Too movement is all about, and it was needed at the time. I get it, like Me
Yes.
Too movement is there for women to recognize that, there's more than just them out there. That there's a collective of women that are in abusive relationships, and it had to play out, perfect timing in society, in consciousness, that ability to recognize that, it's a pandemic, it's an issue in society. And like right now, with the shift in consciousness, we're moving um from the age of Pisces, which is all about control and domination, and we're moving into the age of Aquarius, which is all about self-authority and, peace, love, among beings and all that sort of stuff. And here you are, you've put together this Me Too, sorry, this so that what is so moving from that I'm a victim into, well, wait a minute, this has happened, but why? So can you share a little bit about, like, I'm assuming you got that, right? You got that correlation between the
Yes.
two. I've just never heard anyone talking about it, because as soon as I heard you that so that what, I'm like, oh man, like that's another piece, right?
Yeah. I mean, the Me Too movement, I mean, as you said, was something that was absolutely necessary at the time. We needed a space where we could talk about the fact that this is not just a small subset of the population.
Yeah.
It's nearly damn near all of us, right? In some construct of, sexual abuse, domestic violence, like there's something that has happened to almost every single one of us. And that is a systemic problem, right? That is
Mm,
not an isolated incident of what you're wearing today. Thank you very much, right? Like this is something that needed to no longer be tolerated. And I remember in the throes of the Me Too movement, I was still in bartender land, and this had given me, um, I don't know that it was courage. It was, probably me taking a shot and posting something, to be honest, back then. But to really name one of my abusers, and this was actually before the domestic violence relationship that we're talking about now. But I had a very trusted mentor in the bartender community who was the, very high up in the national rankings of the Bartenders Guild. And, he sexually assaulted me. And at the time, um, I was actually in Florida, and I was on a trip with my children. He lived in Florida, and so I had traveled with my mother and my children to take them to Disneyland, right? And so I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go meet up. I'm gonna go meet up with my bartender buddy and do all these things, right?" And my mom was like, "Okay, I'll watch the kids." And so I went and I met up with him. I did not drink, right? I was there with my kids. And so like I went and I met up with him. I had a conversation with him. He did drink. We went to dinner. Everything was fine. We got in the car and he was driving me back to the hotel. And he's married with children, and I love his wife, right? And also like gross. Like this dude was like literally 20 years older than me, right? And he like forced me, right? And like, I mean attempted to rape me. And like I fought him off and got out of the parking lot, or got out of the car in a parking lot. It was pouring ass rain, and I ran into a restaurant. I
yeah.
ran into a restaurant and to call a cab and all the things. I was a crying ass mess. It was insane. But no one believed me. No one. Right? Like I reported him to the other people in the National Bartenders Guild. No one believed me. I mean, at the cops were like, "Well, did he rape you?" It's like, no, there's no justice if they attempt rape. They have
Yeah.
to actually succeed at it in order for there to be criminal charges. What in the fuck is that?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I was astounded. Like, I could not believe that I was calling the Florida police and then that was what I was being told, was that he had to have actually succeeded in order for there to be charges. I
Yeah.
couldn't believe it. What world do we live in? And so
Yes,
during
exactly. Yeah.
it was crazy. So during the Me Too movement, I said his name and I tagged him, and his wife found out, right? And all of the things. And so this was, very scary for me. And it was like, I mean, I was very much in the industry still, and I was completely ostracized in it, completely. I ended up got kicked out of the organization shortly thereafter. Coincidence? I think not, right? Like that's how that all shook out. Because if you name your abuser, you are the accuser, and in that you get punished, right? And so it was very necessary for me at that point in my life, and it definitely started, a cataclysmic riff with me in the bar industry, to start looking at things differently and seeing like, oh, these people that I thought cared about me don't give a flying fuck about me, right? They're so busy protecting their own that they're not going to do anything. But what that did was left me in survivorship. Sure, I reported it. Sure, I said it out loud. Sure, I told the secret. But then what? Then I
Yeah.
became a survivor, right? Then I became a survivor, and five people on the internet clapped and told me I was brave. And then I got kicked out of my entire fucking life for reporting this. And so, in that survivorship, I went into survival mode because I had to. And that I spent years in that mode of survival mode because the movement didn't perpetuate the next step in the narrative. It didn't give us what to do next,
Next.
right? And so
Yeah.
it was good to
It's
start the
a
momentum, but now
vibration,
what?
right? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes. And
Yeah.
I mean, perfectly, like what you're saying with, the age of Aquarius shifting into the self-sovereignty is like, yes, I named it, I said it, I did it, I did everything I was supposed to do, and now my whole life is falling apart because now I'm in survival mode, having to protect myself from all these people, right? And so I survived, and I mean, I've been through, honestly, I mean, not that we want to downplay these things, but I've been through much worse, right? And I've survived through domestic violence, and I was molested as a kid. My mom was horribly abused by my father. So I have the survivorship in me, but I don't want to be a survivor. I don't want to be a warrior, right? Like, I don't want to live my entire life being defined by these things that have happened to me, right? And saying like, oh, my trauma defines me in the sense that I was molested as a kid and raped and all of these things. I don't want to be tethered to my abusers by calling myself, I am on a t-shirt, a survivor. I don't want that. There's so much more to my life. There's so much more to who I am than surviving this terrible thing that never should have been done to me in the first place, right? I needed to move beyond victim. I needed to be moved beyond survivor, but what's the next category? And like I started kind of exploring this narrative of like, what is the next thing? And it's like, to a certain extent, it's like, well, I mean, logically, we're talking about being a hero and being, the main character in your own story and all of that. But the truth is that no one should get to choose that for you. I've had so many choices taken away from me in this life. And so I'm not going to choose what label comes for you next. I'm going to ask you a question. Yes, you were a victim. Yes, you survived. So that what? What do you get to do now? Because now you get to choose. All those choices were taken away from you, and now you have your self sovereignty. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to go head back to another abusive relationship? Are you going to pass this on to your children? Are you going to repeat the systemic problem of worthlessness, or are you going to do something different? Because when you ask a question, it stimulates the prefrontal cortex, getting us out of survival mode and into that creative life force energy that can outcreate the edges of that old era and step us into this new age, right? Becoming the version of ourselves that's claiming our consciousness, but also claiming our self sovereignty in being able to choose what comes next. I don't want to be a part of a fucking movement that's giving me a label that I have to adhere to. I want to choose my own. And so my so that what is so that I become the mother that I always wanted to be, so that I can attract the love of my life, so that I can build a seven-figure business helping people and focusing on impact, so that I can become an author and the founder of the so that what movement. That is my so that what. And there will be so many more because I get to continue to make choices. Because never again will I allow myself to be in the situations where those choices are taken away from me by really activating the victim frequency that called in this repetitious behavior pattern of always playing the victim.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so powerful. And, it just makes me think about, you don't know what you don't know. And until someone asks you the question, sometimes you just feel stuck because that's what society's doing, right? Society's got us in the Me Too movement, because that's what's been happening. But to step into that next level or that opportunity to ask yourself, like the expansion that I can see come from that, the empowerment that can come from that, um, is going to be so powerful. I can just see it that it's an amazing connection between the book and the movement to, like what are your visions for this?
I mean, it's a big, scary vision,
Yeah,
right?
bloody hell, I can imagine.
It's kind of terrifying because it does feel too big to hold, right? And that's, a big part of why I'm asking for support. I know that the first step in receiving is asking, and that's why I'm asking for the support of people like you. I'm asking for the support of other people who have been through this, because this is just, it's too heavy. I can't carry this by myself, right? Like, I can do a lot of shit by myself. I have done a lot of shit by myself, right? But this is the frequency of interdependence, not independence. And so this is a movement that I see in the vision for all of us, of how we can create that collaborative energy and to perpetuate this so that what movement, like, I can't do it by myself. So it is learning to become the person who can ask for and receive support, and to really know that other people care, and to really tap into that frequency of the word care, because I've spent most of my life believing that nobody cared, including me. I didn't care about me, right? I mean, clearly, I made lots of decisions that showed that I did not care about myself, right? And so now that I do, I want to help other people to care about themselves. And that, sometimes needs to be mirrored through us caring about each other. And so I'm asking for other people to give a shit. I'm asking people to care about something that we feel like we can't change. We feel like is so much bigger than us. And I know that that's a tall ask. But if all of us can care just a little bit, then it will move this momentum, in a bigger direction. And I think it might be a little bit bigger than even I can stomach within the vision of this. I know that I'm starting it. I know that my higher self is guiding me in this. I'm trusting my higher self. But it feels daunting. It feels huge. It feels heavy. It feels like, how the fuck am I going to do this by myself? How am I going to be able to do this movement justice? And I don't know. I don't have the answers to it. I believe that I will have the answers to it. And I believe that I will become the person who's capable of executing and implementing, but I know that I'm not that person today. And so it's a little bit scary to think about who I need to become and what I need to let go of. I know that one of those big pieces of what I get to release is, more of the victim narrative. And, I used to carry this belief that nobody cares. And that in itself is such a huge piece of victim. And I found myself saying it just the other day. I was like, nobody fucking cares, right? And then it was like, oh, there it is. That's it right there. That's the thing that I get to release, is the belief that nobody cares. I get to touch my nose and repattern that, because I care. And so nobody includes me, even if I want to believe that I'm outside of the human species because I'm the unicorn. I am somebody. I am somebody and I do care. And you are somebody and you do care. And so the more people that we can connect with who do care in this So That What movement, I mean, the more we can get and change the point of reference, and, systemically change that worthlessness and that feeling that nothing matters. Like, everything matters as much as you decide it does, right? And so I get to choose that this movement matters regardless of what anybody else is or is not doing. And sometimes that will be an uphill battle for me. And sometimes that will be challenging, but I get to rise to the occasion. I get to become the person. I get to hold the frequency regardless of what the world is ready for. I have been historically, in smaller doses, the bearer of bad news that things have to change, right? I've done this for a lot of my clients, right? But I've done it a lot in the industry. I've been a catalyst for change. And so I believe that all of those were practices for this catalyst,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
become the person who's strong enough to hold the frequency of this catalyst. And I'm not gonna lie, I don't feel like I am. Right? I don't feel like I am. I feel like this is hard and scary. And what if I don't do it right? But I get to sit with that uncomfortable feeling, and I get to get comfortable being uncomfortable in order to become the person who can hold the frequency of this catalyst.
Yeah. And when you think about it, right, like any birth, there's labor, and like there's a
And
lot of
pain
fucking
and
effort.
suffering.
But once that baby's out, that baby's its own entity, right?
Yeah.
And it grows and it has its own experiences that is, so I know that I have been throwing out, the hashtag so that what on a regular basis, and you know but also looking like it's an opportunity for reflection, right? It's an opportunity for growth. That's what's so beautiful about the movement. It's the opportunity to reflect and recognize why these things have happened, like, and it doesn't have to be just connected to, domestic violence. There's, I did this so that I could get to here. And so Is there any particular, like I would like to encourage my audience as well to stop, reflect, and to use this, so that what hashtag to start getting this movement being a baby rather than the labor of it, right? To already have its own little its own little being. We need to be as women to really support this, and men, like all of us in society to start shifting into this dynamic of or the transformation of out of victimhood and into self-sovereignty, right? Is there anything in particular that you would love to see, like, as part of the start of the vision? Is there anything in particular that you would love to ask of my audience or to ask of people, like as we support you in this vision?
I mean, the first step is the radical responsibility, right? And I mean, I know that is a big ask, right? But it's to look at yourself and to say, I'm not a victim of my life. I made these choices so that what? So I could learn this and to really reflect in that way and to start looking at yourself and realize you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. Like that, these things didn't happen to you. They happened for you. And you get to define the parameters of what you make those things mean about you. I mean, I could sit here and go on for the rest of my life complaining about being molested as a 2-year-old child. I could make that my entire identity. But will that help my children? Will that help your children? Will that help anybody? For me to play
Mm,
the victim for the rest of my life in this play. Like it certainly won't, right? So I get to take radical responsibility for the fact that my being, my spirit, my magic chose this life. I chose the frequency of being this human in this body, in this set of circumstances, so that what? So that I could learn, so I could become, so I could transmute this energy. And I am strong enough to transmute this pain, and you are strong enough to transmute your pain. And in that strength and fortitude and that support, we all collectively become the next version of ourselves and usher us out of this era and into the next age of that radical responsibility as we shift our self sabotage patterns into self sovereignty and reclaim our power. So, can you feel it? Can you know it? Can you choose it? Even in the moments when you want to play the victim like you used to, can you change? And I mean, I know that that is a big ask. But every time you do, every little transmutation that we all make collectively counts. There's no such thing as baby steps. Every step matters on that spiral staircase. And so I would love for any member of your audience that feels and connects with this to share their story of so that what. And there's probably thousands of them, right? Of, why you called in something and what you learned in that lesson that you couldn't have learned any other way. And now what you're doing with that lesson to better your life, to better the lives of your children, to better the lives of your clients. What are you doing with that impact? Please share that story. Use the hashtag, put this into a reel, put it on Facebook. Help me to perpetuate this movement so we start having this conversation, not just about the victim and not just about the person that did this to us. And that
mm,
reminder that trauma is not what happened. Trauma is the loop that we replay in our heads over and over, thinking that what happened in the past is still happening today. And we don't need to recreate trauma. We don't need to do that. We can create that self-sovereign choice of what we want our lives to be so we can build a life worth living. If you go to sothatwhat.org, we've started a book team full of people that are on board with this ideology and are starting to promote this and starting to go out and share their so that what stories so that you have the support and we can have these deeper level conversations in there so you do feel safe and strong and good to be out there sharing those stories. So if you go and fill out the short application, we're just trying to get your address because we're trying to send you goodies in the mail, right? So fill out the application. Become a part of the book team and encourage other people to go to sothatwhat.org. And as these stories start to come out in different ways, we're going to fill up that page with everybody else's stories so that people know, just like in the Me Too movement, that they're not alone in releasing their victim and choosing the frequency of self-sovereignty. We are stronger together, and in the collective energy, we can amplify and collapse the timelines so much faster to create a world that is worthy of us to live in because we're so quick to fucking complain. What if we didn't complain? What if we actually did something about it? What if we actually just changed? That's the question, you know? What if we choose to change? We can,
Mm,
but will we? Right?
yeah. Yeah. And doing this as a collective to, to bring that energy in is so powerful. So it's been such a pleasure, Nicole. Before we go though, for anyone that's like, well, how do we get the book? Like, how do we get in contact with Nicole? Like, we want to know more. How do we go about this?
Okay, so when you go to sewthatwet.org, there will be links to the books. And of course, we're releasing these books in layers because I love to launch. It's what I do in my business side of things. So we have the first layer available right now for everybody who's coming in from the entrepreneurial side, which I know that a lot of you magic women are. If you're in that frequency of helping others, I'm helping everybody to kind of create offers in a masterclass that are going to be high ticket offers that are, AI proof because I know this is coming down the pipeline right now that the robot is changing things and we want to make sure that we are keeping money in the hands of good people doing good things. And so we're AI proofing our offers, ensuring that your audience knows that they can't just replace you with a robot because you, of course, are irreplaceable, and so should your offers and so should your revenue streams. They should also be irreplaceable. Let's not let the AI take that from us. So we're doing a masterclass, and everybody that comes to that masterclass, we are donating those proceeds to the charity that's run through Weave, which is for women who have survived domestic violence, but we're actually working with them in the preventative space to create an app right now that's for teens and parents to have very challenging conversations around relationships because abuse should not be a rite of passage. And so we want to prevent that, right? It's not about like, let's just support all the people that are going through it. What if we stopped it? That would be great, right? And so that's what we're seeking to do with the app. So the proceeds are benefiting the app for that. But everybody, well, the first 50 people that join this masterclass, which has just been released today, will receive a copy of the book, right? The signed first editions of these books will be available right now through this. And then we will be releasing the full book to the masses through, Amazon and all the normal channels and following all of the Barnes and Noble things that we can and, getting the book out to as many places as we possibly can will be available on July 1st following that masterclass. So that masterclass will kick off the actual release of the copy of the book. But we would love to have you join the book team. That's another way to kind of get involved in this process now. But I'm excited to be able to send out all of these signed copies and to, have everybody have those hardcovers in their hands and actually reading them, which is kind of terrifying. But I'm very much looking forward to, seeing that shift of it becoming something tangible and something real.
Yeah, yeah, I'm looking forward to watching it as well. Thank you so much, Nicole, and for everyone that was watching. We had quite a few people watching live stream, which was awesome, and so early here in Australia.
Yeah, it's very early. Thank you guys.
And yeah, just I'll put all the links below so that you can jump in and check that out. And looking forward to seeing the So That What movement. And I just encourage all the women in this Facebook group, jump in and put your So That What post up into the group as well so that we can, start encouraging and creating this beautiful empowered movement. So take care, everyone. Thank you, Nicole.
Thanks for having me.